Stay tuned until the end of...
喜べ少年。君の願いはようやく叶う。
Yes! Rejoice, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. Well, we've said Merry Christmas, and now we say Happy New Year. We're going to be kicking off the year, as we usually do, with a limited SSR unit, an alter ego, a guy you've been looking for a while, Rasputin, aka Father Kotomine. Didn't really plan for that to sound so lyrical. Anyway, this is Let's Talk FGO Wanted. This is a video series. It's not the first one ever, where we talk about a character's real-life history, their fate lore, their mechanics, because, you want to know if you're rolling a good unit, probably, and more, so everybody get ready for all of that. Also, likely in general, warning at the top, this is going to contain some general Fate franchise spoilers if you're not caught up on Fate Stay Night, available now on Steam, and also might have a few Lost Belt 7 Part 1 spoilers. Not really, but some stuff may come up. So, what can we say about Grigori Rasputin? He was big and strong, and in his eyes a flaming glow. I cannot promise this is the last Boney M reference you will find in this script. Well, what we can say is Grigori Yefimovich Rasputin was born on the 21st of January, 1869, nice, died 30th December, 1916, at age 47. So, we've just passed a anniversary date of his death. Wonder if that's why they did decide to go for the New Year's release. So, Rasputin is often described as a monk, sometimes as the Mad Monk, or a pilgrim. He was of the Russian Orthodox faith, on paper, but he never held any position of authority in the church. He didn't go fully through seminary school and become a, proper priest or anything. So, monk is usually the term we use. We know almost nothing about Rasputin's youth. He was just a normal Russian peasant who seems to have lived a normal, unremarkable life that nobody thought to write down about, until he had a serious religious conversion in 1897, it's usually recorded. He actually, underwent some pilgrimages and started to take up religious vocation. Sources of discussion on Rasputin's Riz started about 1904 to 1905. He began to attract followers, amass, groups of people listening to his speaking. He gained positive impressions from the church among locals in the city of Kazan. What exactly he was prevaricating is also kind of loosely recorded, and some of it is exaggerated. There's some specific things we'll talk about later, but in general, he just seems to have been a chill guy who seemed to be okay with God and talked about that fact, and people were interested to listen. And it should be noted that even as early as this period, there were lots of rumors about Rasputin being involved in salacious or unorthodox activities, being involved with his female followers, even from this time, and association with groups that were heretical. There were specific groups that he was supposed to be associated with. There's two Y's in here. Kislisty? A underground Christian sect in Russia. There's no proper proof that he was ever part of that sect, but some of the things he would say later about, religious practices would be related to say, oh, he's got, I won't say that word again just in case I can't do it, but he's like those people. So, they got a little stuff for him. But after this period, he eventually traveled to St. Petersburg. He began to take meetings with Imperial Russia's elite, go to their salons, their, morning meetings. At the time, there's a lot of craze for occultists, alternative religious beliefs like theosophy, and just a general desire for something new. The Russian elite were very bored in their status quo. He apparently was at least somewhat popular because he was a holy person who was actually Russian natively. Now, we do have notes of his first recorded meeting with Tsar Nicholas, as the Tsar did write it down in his diary in 1st November 1905. He claimed that he wrote he met a man of God, Grigori, from Tobolsk province. No further detailed notes are recorded, but that was in his diary. The exact position of putting Rasputin as a faith healer is unknown. Some say he began doing this service immediately in 1905. Others say it wasn't until October 1906 that he started to actually be consulted as a faith healer. But at some point after his first meeting, the Tsar liked him enough that they introduced Rasputin to the imperial children. The big thing you want to know that is why a lot of this faith healing stuff comes up is that the Tsar's youngest child, Alexei Nikolaevich, had hemophilia. That's the condition which impedes your body's ability to form blood clots, so internal bleeding is very risky. External cuts can also bleed a long time. Again, not really known exactly when he became aware of the boy's condition, but Rasputin was eventually circled in, and several times he was called upon to offer, prayer and healing to the young prince and calm the Tsarina Alexandra. He was routinely consulted and brought in, like I said, in this faith healing context. One of the most famous cases we do have on record, because there was telegrams exchanged, is that at one point there was a carriage lurch and Alexei was bleeding internally. The Tsarina was so worried about him, she telegrammed back to Rasputin, who had returned to Siberia at the time, and his response is basically very simple. He told her, "Do not worry, God is with him, your child will not die, relax, don't let the doctors bother him too much." And, Alexei basically almost miraculously recovered. The Tsarina had the doctors leave him alone for a few days, let him relax, and what exactly medically that could be, we don't know, but it may have just, given him an opportunity to recover naturally without getting poked and prodded by 1900s doctors. This incident, though, really solidified Rasputin's reputation and his essentialness to the imperial household. As a result of the trust for being believed to have a positive result on Alexei's condition, and in some cases, too, having a positive result, let us never talk down the placebo effect, Rasputin was appointed the lamplighter of the imperial household. He was charged specifically with keeping the lamps lit before religious icons. This gave him basically regular free access to the imperial palaces. Rasputin was deeply trusted in the imperial household. He was close with all of the imperial children. He was allowed to go into their nurseries and private rooms without supervision. Several of the nannies and nurses and governesses did not like this. It was suspicious, even scandalous to some other members of the Tsar's staff. But by all accounts, as much as you can trust 1900s, Rasputin never seemed to act inappropriately with any of the Tsar's daughters. He was a respected friend. All of the Grand Duchesses were very visibly shocked and saddened when his death was reported later, because spoilers, he died, probably. No, in real life, actually, we can say he definitely died. He's not actually a lich. It's just one of those things that we like to talk about. We'll get into that very shortly. But he genuinely seemed to be a helpful and comforting ear, at the very least, to the imperial household. But, like I said earlier, Rasputin did gain some controversies. He was known to be a drinker. He engaged in extramarital affairs with women of all social standings, from Russian nobility to prostitutes. He was often accused of heretical teachings, and eventually some of his earlier followers did level some accusations of inappropriate behavior at him. What exactly the heretical stuff is, I want to say, kind of loosey-goosey. Mostly, I think it's just the sexual stuff he was not locked in on, which is usually considered inappropriate in Christian circles, though he was not actually a priest, so it's not, outright rule-breaking. But like I said, mostly they just said he had false doctrines of kist-like, progression. Something, physical contact is super holy. Let me hold you, babe. Russia's greatest love machine. But after all the accusations, the investigations even by the secret police, etc., which didn't really find him doing anything actively wrong, but were definitely like, this guy's kind of shady. The Tsar refused to have him exiled. This bred even more resentment because it thought he was influencing the imperial family. There are a lot of, political cartoons and drawings of him, like, puppeting the Tsar and Tsarina around and stuff like that. It's, one of those things where, you've just met a problematic fave and you don't want to block them on Twitter.com. This is the Imperial Russian version of that from the 1910s. But ultimately, the tensions boiled over. Rasputin was assassinated. He'd already survived one attempt in 1914. A woman, one of his early followers, decided he was demonic or the Antichrist and stabbed him in the stomach. He lived, bitch. But he did ultimately die, as we said before, in 1916. So, according to their reports, the first round of assassins, several other, influential men and women from around Russia, attempted to poison him with cyanide. They put them in cakes and wine. Autopsy reports show no signs of poison. He allegedly did not like sweets, so this may be why eventually the conspirators were forced to shoot him with a revolver. The first bullet was probably an abdomen shot, and so the conspirators went about the process of concealing their murder. They dressed up in his coat and tried to go back to his apartment and stuff. They hit him with one bullet. They returned later to clean up the body. Allegedly, Rasputin leapt up from the floor to defend himself and was shot several more times, including a close-range shot to the head. This is the actual cause of death. But at that point, the assassins were so unconvinced of the fact that he was actually dead that they wrapped him in cloth and dumped him in a river. Now, according to sources at the time, when they discovered his body later, doctors said that he didn't die from the bullets but died of the drowning, our later scientific discussions make it pretty clear that, like I said, he probably wasn't poisoned, and he did not actually drown. The headshot did ultimately prove fatal, but you can instantly see how this indestructible, the undefeatable guy myth immediately came up. Oh, we thought we poisoned him, but the cyanide didn't stick. We shot him multiple times. That didn't stick. So we dumped him in the river, and they're like, oh, even the bullets, it was the drowning that got him. No. He was but a mortal man, but he had just enough of a spook factor. He had just enough of an aura, as the kids say, that they thought they had to kill him like 3 times. Also, additionally, the Russian Revolution, the communists didn't help their account, because during the Russian Revolution in 1917, soldiers exhumed his body and burned it because they wanted to prevent it from being used as a rallying cry by the Tsarists. They thought this guy had so much mojo, like a year after he died, or since it was the end of 1916, more likely like 6 months, but still. After he died, they thought this guy had so much charisma left that they were like, no, we need to make sure we, find and destroy and rebury his body so they can't fucking use this guy against us. That said, Rasputin did have at least one legal acknowledged daughter. She survived, so I believe his family line continues to this day. And obviously, since there was so much rumor-mongering and legend surrounding him, he's a major figure in popular culture. There are historical fiction, films and books released almost immediately after his death. I think the first silent film about Rasputin is, from 1917 or 18, literally the years following his death. And obviously more fantastical versions. Many of you out there from a similar generation of me may remember the Don Bluth Anastasia film with Christopher Lloyd as evil Lich Rasputin, which doesn't make a lick of goddamn sense. Not him being an immortal Lich wizard with a bat familiar, but him trying to, capture and cap the secret Duchess Anastasia. By all accounts, again, Rasputin would probably have been, trying to shadowily restore her to the throne. They were, as we've seen in Fate, they were homies. What's up, my homies? And, there are many other relations back and forth. So, moving over to the Fate side, Rasputin is a pseudo-servant alter ego. So he is occupying a human vessel and also is comprising elements of multiple servants, which we will discuss later. I don't think that Rasputin, per se, needs to be a pseudo-servant. I feel like being a guy who's, almost 100 years old, and there's a lot of mystery about him, he could probably be a caster or assassin class servant of a very low power level on his own. But, we've got some people doing some summoning and stuff, so we get in there. The primary component, as we said, is Rasputin. The body is Kyrie Kotomine, who, by his own profile, is the greatest antagonist in Fate Stay Night. I don't know if he wrote that himself. He didn't actually. I'm sure Nasi wrote this profile. But, no, we're not pulling any punches on that one. So, Father Kotomine is a major character in Fate Stay Night. He's a shady priest. He's usually antagonistic. He is the final opponent in one route and is usually a major threat in others. But depending on the circumstances, he can be more helpful. He is the kind of guy who is a bad man, but depending on the circumstances, will help other people. He's also big in all Fate-related spin-offs. He's a major character in Zero, because that's the prequel. He shows up in lots of other works as well. Also, his name will often be referenced. He is an NPC in Fate Extra, in the digital recreation. He is the father of Karen Hortensia, who uses her mother's name usually for reasons that you should check out our Amor Karen Wanted on if you want some more backstory in that side. Obviously, he shows up in the alternate versions for the Prilliaverse, stuff like that. He's all over the place. Now, in FGO, they specifically mention that Kyrie Kotomine is supposed to have died in 2004 in Japan, presumably during the last Fuyuki Grail War, or the first, actually, and only in this case, but you know what I mean. 2004 is when the Fifth Holy Grail War takes place, normally. And his body was supposed to be destroyed. This is why when he shows up in the Lost Belt prologue, people are like, huh? But historically, presumably non-negotiable backstory, Kyrie is a member of the Holy Church. This is the secrets part of the Catholic Church who are aware of mystery and the Mages Association and stuff. They're basically the version of the Roman Catholic Church that is in on the masquerade, so they can be involved in, setting stuff without asking too many questions. And in specific, Kotomine served as an executor, which is basically a combat exorcist. They do actually, the Holy Church has general purpose exorcists and, demon finders and stuff, but specifically, the executors are trained to militantly handle problems like demons, rogue mages, vampires, other bad stuff. So he has, combat skills in addition to his ability to exercise, baptize, and do other things. He throws them black keys, But eventually he does retire from that life to rejoin his father in Fuyuki City and takes on roles related to the church and caretaking the Holy Grail War. Again, not really sure, because we don't actually have any details on the Fuyuki War that happened in FGO that Marsbury just steamrolled with Solomon. So I don't know if he was actually one of the masters, if he was just the church administrator, or what. Knowing him, he was up to some bullshit, but it's still very open-ended. After the events of Lost Belt 1, Rasputin, during that time, makes sure to take a personal interest in Anastasia's goals, but once she is defeated and the Lost Belt is closed, he basically takes a backseat to let Kotomine's personality come to the forefront. So the summonable version and the version you see in all later parts of Cosmos and the Lost Belt story are mostly Kotomine. And in fact, I would probably say that the part you see in the Cosmos and the Lost Belt prologue is also mostly Kotomine. He's only mostly Rasputin in Lost Belt 1 exactly. But he's an alter ego and a disciple of the foreign god, so Rasputin has some other stuff mixed in with him. Of course he does. We're doing the classic tripart summon, in fact. So the first other part we know is Balu, the moon spirit from Gamilaré. There's a double A in there. I'm not sure how long to make that vowel. Mythology, that's an Aboriginal Australian nation. Balu is associated with a couple of myths. The most prominent one involves snakes and the concept of death. Balu is minding his own business and wants to cross a river. There's some humans there, and he asks them to carry his dogs, which are snakes, because he's accompanied by a couple of snakes at all times. Humans refuse because snakes are scaly, and so he does it himself, and then when he gets to the other side, Balu throws a stone into the river and says humans will always sink, i.e. they will always eventually die and, move on to the afterlife. And then he throws in a piece of bark. The bark rises to the top and floats. So Balu says that he will always rise, thus he is an immortal, unkillable spirit. And this relates as well to several of Kotomine's things going on. The other element is the evil king Zahak the Snake Shoulders, who is from Persian mythology. He is also known as the Azidahaka. He is the opposite of the good king, and in particular, myths about him as Zahak don't actually say that, he was a real bad dude at first. He's just easily influenced by his counselors, so Ariman, aka Angramanyu, uses him from his ongoing operation to sow chaos and discord. You may remember Zahak from an overly sarcastic OSP Productions video a few years back. It's the guy with the snakes on his shoulders. You should check that one out if you need a refresher on some of his basic myth outline. But old Johnny Snake Shoulders is why you'll see Angramanyu referenced in Kotomine's NP, because Azidahaka is supposed to be close pals with Angramanyu. In some of the older works, in the Avesta and stuff like that, Azidahaka is sometimes straight up portrayed as just a three-headed evil dragon or snake for extra symbolism. So this is why he has the dragon trait, for instance, and a few other of these elements. We're conflating snakes and dragons because it makes him cooler, and also, again, ties more tightly into Angramanyu. Why is Kotomine tied so closely to Angramanyu? I can answer that, but I won't, because it's technically a tangent. But it's one of those funny things they do to match up there that you can obviously see if you get the extra symbolism. But story-wise, as a disciple of the foreign god, before we even knew what that's what was about, Rasputin has been visible since the aforementioned intro of Cosmos and the Lost Belt, and presumably will be with us until the end of Cosmos and the Lost Belt, the second half of LB7 coming soon-ish? ? So he has been a fairly consistent back-and-forth party, all the way from his terrifying, bum rush of the storm border with a rocket launcher to steal back Kadok and shit. It's crazy pants talk. And that said, though, they called their shot on Rasputin being a Kire face ages ago. All the way back for Idasfield Dress of Heaven, the welfare servant for the Fate Zero collab, which was, very early on in FGO's history. Her character materials, which I think is character materials book 1, so the first one of those they published, she has a line of relationships to other characters about Rasputin where she says they don't get along, and she uses some language similar to how she refers to Kotomine. So that is ages before they set up for Lost Belts. That's year 1 or year 2 of Observer and Timeless Temple, part 1 story. So we had some version of this in the can for a very long time before we paid it out for this whole story. And obviously, as we kind of come to the apex of that, and also, like I said, the anniversary of his death, we can bring it back in. So, mechanisms. Let's talk about it. Rasputin is an alter ego. He has high HP and lower attack. The lowest of a 5-star alter ego, actually. And his HP is not quite as large as Kiara. But he is an alter ego, so there is a broad plethora of class advantages he hits. He is QQAA, 2 quick, 2 arts, 1 buster, above average hit counts, and then a below average NP gain of 0.42. He's got 5 hits on his quick and 4 on his arts and busters, so like I said, higher hits, big slaps. His NP does a decent amount of things. It's AoE arts, it deals bonus damage to enemies who are evil, so super effective damage, an extra trait multiplier usually. It gives all enemies 1k of curse and burn damage for 3 turns each, and then also spreading fire and evil curse for 3 turns for plus 100% damage. So it's actually 2k burn, 2k curse, but, the spreading fire and evil curse amplifies all curse and burn damage that enemy is suffering. It also, at the end, after all that bullshit, has a 60% chance to instantly kill enemies of a good alignment. The overcharge is very simply he artses up himself for 1 turn first. Pretty normal self-steroid on NP. His first skill is pretty cool. It's a targetable 1k to 2k heal, so 2k at max level. I realize I've done, literally over 120 of these, so sometimes I short frame my notes, and I'm like, oh, I should say, just in case somebody hasn't watched one of these before, the lower number on the skill is at skill level 1, the high number is your maximum at skill level 10. It is also regardless of skill level, a targetable debuff clear, which is very cool, and is also a 20 to 30% attack up for 3 turns for that targeted servant. And if you max out its level, this is on a 4-turn cooldown. Every 4 turns, you get 3 turns of attack up, and also a 1k to 2k heal and debuff removal. That's pretty poggers, if I will say. Second skill is 20-30% battery on self, 10 to 20% NP battery for all evil allies. This doesn't say except self, so this should mean that he is technically a 50% battery, just in 2 stages. It's also a 10 to 20% arts up for evil allies for 3 turns, but he deals 2k damage to himself. Again, his HP is very large, so this 2k damage, which can't even kill you, is not something to worry about, especially with the way his third skill strat works. But this is a pretty decent team-wide buff. He gets a 50% NP gauge out of it, and the rest of your teammates get some arts up. But he can also do himself. His third skill is, first, a stackable 1-time 3 turns guts for 1 HP. It also gives a 3-turn chance, a 60 to 80% chance, to proc a different guts, which is also 1 HP. So if I'm understanding the way this mechanic works correctly, you get 1 normal guts, and then you get a percentage-based buff, which is, if he dies, you may trigger a guts with an 80% chance. It's also a 3-turn taunt, and a 3-turn on guts buff to give himself 20% NP damage for 5 turns. Now, if that doesn't sound appealing to you, in the visual for this, I have included what is actually the buffed version. This buff just happened in JP, so you're probably going to wait a couple years for it, but it does improve some of these. So first of all, they made the chance-based buff of guts stackable so long as the other guts is not probability-based, which is basically the necromancy CE. So this means that you can reapply his other guts to it, which is obviously stackable, and also you can use other, if you've got like a targetable guts, or you've got a CE that is a 1-time guts, etc. All those still work, and you also get your stack of percentage-based guts, your 80% chance to guts at max level. Also, the NP damage becomes party-wide when guts triggers, adding in some more funny haha team support to him. Passives are Territory Creation B, so his arts cards are a little better than you think. He's got a unique Executor B, which produces his arts, or not his arts, but his general critical damage and star generation by 8%, same as his Territory passive. He has Sacrament A, which gives him a fairly reasonable mental debuff resist. It's like 20 or 30%. I didn't write down the numbers, but it's enough to matter. And then his final funny ability is that he is completely immune to the poison status, for Rasputin reasons. So, Father Kotomine is an arts AoE guy. He has a couple of self-buffs, but he's probably not an ideal wave clearer because he does only have 2-ish amps. Like, he has the arts up and the attack up if you're targeting himself, obviously, and you might get the NP out of it. And his attack is lowest in slot. Trait damage can cover a lot, though, and evil is very common, so that should help him through some enemies, and alter egos do have a broad class advantage as well. That was redundant the way I said it, but whatever. Instead, what you can probably guess because of his setup is he's probably better for challenge quests and heavy story fights. He is a 3-turn taunter with a possibility of a lot of guts. This is actually a decent strat if you're doing certain challenges or just tough fights. Getting taunters who can chump block can be very useful. And you can theoretically, like, if you roll good on those 80% for 3 turns in a row, he can basically guts indefinitely. He also does have some party-wide buffs and NP charge meant to raise up your allies, and his heal and debuff removal is on a very short cooldown. That, to me, absolutely says that he's there to remove annoyances during tough fights. If you're doing normal farming, you're not going to encounter debuffs or damage. So this means that he can support your squad through tough fights by keeping the pressure off them while gradually chipping away at the enemy's damage, their HP, and boosting your allies' damage. You can probably use him as off DPS to support your evil squad mates during long enduring fights. You know, it's the kind of thing where, like, he probably shouldn't be your primary damage dealer because he's not going to maximize that damage output, but he can still keep putting pressure on enemies while also being a team player supporter, and just like I said, a tank, a chump blocker. His NP does guarantee plus 100% curse and burn damage for 3 turns, so he can complement your teams there. He's only lawful evil, so it's not a perfect match, but you can work with him with units like Doman in that regard to just give enemies a shitload of curse. I believe that Jacques de Molay is neutral evil for some of her curse-based damage stuff. So there's a few things out there. I think most foreigners are chaotic evil by definition as well, so I think I'd have to double check, but I think Yang Guifei can work as well with burn stuff. But if you want to team up, you can pick some big evil attackers. Doman and Moriarty have some friendly team-wide buffs, and regular Moriarty is single target. But there's a wide variety of chaotic evil servants with big attack. Mostly the classic Avengers, but also some of the foreigners. This means you can get big AoE or big single-target deeps, and keep both of those, functions. If you want to use him as your primary DPS, I recommend the Cavalcade of Arch Servants. He is already the unkillable man, the indestructible one. Any combination of Castoria, Tamamo, Jean, or Lady Avalon will generally make Kotomine actually unkillable. Paracelsus is a budget option with, arts up and a targetable guts that's really good. Like, if you want to go back to classic arts stall, MASH is another great classic arts staller, you will become ungovernable, by which I mean the enemy will never defeat you. Their life will end 30 turns from now. For CEs, we can go a couple ways here. Don't do a gut CE like Necromancy or some other later ones that also have that percentage effect. You can do the ones, obviously, that start you with one-time guts, but usually those gutses are pretty bad. I would say you can arm Kotomine with a 50% NPCE. He should be able to battery himself up, so you can focus on attack, arts, and NP damage up. Golden Sumo, One Summer, you know the whole rigmarole by now, chat. And if you don't know, you can go on the wiki and can find CEs that count as this zone very effectively. You might also consider defensive CEs, though this one's a little hard because all of the ones I would recommend for this slot are, like, old and out of circulation. Before Awakening is a CE that features Kire on it, and it has the 10% Arts Buster Quick and Defense up, so that's just general, but that's an old event CE. The old Iron Will Training, which also had Kire on it, is a 20% Defense up, but that's, like, out of circulation, so I don't know exactly where you'd want to go. They have not done a lot of pure Def up CEs since then. I will say, though, that his Bond CE does help certain brews. It's NP damage up in general for him, and also when his Guts procs, it means he generates 20 stars, and that's, like, not once per turn. So usually enemies do stop after a Guts proc, but sometimes they don't. But still, that is if you're building him a certain way, like if you're leaning heavily into the Guts and taunting, that can actually be, like, a really good chip on. So we move on to other stuff. As an alter ego, Kotomine blends requirements together. His Ascension mats are just Rider and Caster statues. Should be manageable, but can be a little tough. I know some people get really deep in the statue reserves before they fill it up. This also is what he needs for his skills, Rider and Caster gems, though his higher levels do mats as well. And these can be some of the pricier new ones, like God Balls and Comet Shards can still be hard to come by if you're not super heavily farming them. And obviously the fact that he needs multiple sets of 2 gems can mean you may, be out of one, but not out of the other. Now, for banners, Kotomine is newer, so he hasn't had too many new rotations, but he has got a few. He's going to be around as our 2025 New Year's Servant. He's going to appear later this year when Ordeal Call's new world map missions are launched. Not an Ordeal Call chapter campaign, but as part of the Ordeal Call chapter of the story, they're doing new missions. There'll be a banner for him. And in JP, he's just had a banner 2 years down the line as LB7 Clear Support. Also, don't be surprised if NA, they sneak in a banner earlier somewhere at, like, Thanksgiving or something. He is a limited SSR, so expect to see him in future Lucky Bag campaigns somewhere as a result as well. And also, not in my script, but just learned this today because JP did their New Year's stream. They're saying because this is going to be the last year of Part 2, it is going to conclude this year. End of service will probably not happen right away. Like, they may actually do some reruns. They may give you some opportunity to actually use some of the new servants you get. But they are planning on rerunning every single limited SSR sometime this year. Do not ask me how fast-paced those summons are going to get started, but this probably means there will be at least one more Kotomine banner. But that's going to be it. That's where we're at. Happy New Year's, folks. We'll see you later in 2025. Hope you're going to enjoy whatever JP's cooking up. Get ready for your Lost Belt 7 conclusion. If you want more of this stuff, of us, the channel, make sure you check out the Wanted we did on Nidacris Alter, since she came out like a month early, and I had to rush that to get it done on Christmas. And stay tuned for our podcast, Let's Talk FGO. It is a podcast in your podcast feed and also on our channel. Go here. We're going to be hitting up our LB7 recap thoughts. If you're a little behind, we're probably going to cut it off somewhere around section 5 or 6, just to be safe. But we're going to be talking at length about all of that, JP's new servants, and other various things. So you're going to want to be sure to tune in. How can you tune in? Well, you're going to want to make sure to like this video, subscribe, ring the bell, consider joining our channel memberships maybe, leave a comment, all that good stuff. And consider supporting us on Patreon to get videos early. I will say more for our patrons later, but I'm going to very briefly do the musical sting transition.
Oh, those Russians.
And before we end this video, I'd like to shout out all of our patrons and sponsors, but especially Adam DeHart, Blackest OG, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, JDW9000, Crystarlight, Legendary Boss Hunter, Liam Kessler, Rice of Kenji, Rogue Robin, Sharvor, Some Guy Named Bob, and Varian the Crow. If you like what we do want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon. Thanks so much, guys. See you in the new year.